My name is Trey, and I'm 32 years old. I've spent most of my life trying to carve out a space for myself, far away from the mess my parents left behind. The mess they never bothered to clean up. I remember growing up in a house where loyalty was a foreign word. My dad, well, let's just say he wasn't the kind of guy who believed until death do us part. The way he'd look at my mom, like she was the one who failed him, when all along it was his own actions that shattered any real sense of family we had left. I was just a kid when it started. I could see the way Mom tried to hold everything together, but it was like watching someone try to fix a sinking ship with duct tape. Every time I came home from school, it was the same. Dad would be gone again, off with one of his many affairs, and Mom would cry in the kitchen, pretending she didn't hear the front door slam shut again. She never left, though. She stayed. Always. I never understood it. How could someone keep forgiving the same betrayal over and over? I promised myself I wouldn't end up like that. I swore I wouldn't let myself be blind to the cracks in a relationship the way she was. And I would never, ever tolerate cheating. That was about 15 years ago. Now, as an adult, I've got a job I love, a small apartment in the city, and a future that's finally starting to feel like it's mine to shape. But that vow I made when I was a kid, it's still there, buried deep down. I married Jod when I was 29, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I'd found someone I could trust. She was everything I needed, steady, grounded, and fiercely loyal. I thought she was the one who'd show me what it felt like to truly share your life with someone. We were building something together, a future that looked solid. We talked about buying a house, starting a family, growing old together. I never imagined, in a million years, that the woman I'd married would be capable of the one thing I couldn't stomach, betrayal. I had this image in my head. The kind of life I wanted to give Jod, the kind of marriage I swore would be different from the one I grew up in. It was supposed to be about honesty, transparency, and most importantly, loyalty. But then something happened. One night, while I was working late at the office, I started noticing changes in Jod. Little things at first. She'd leave her phone around the house more often, and her usual texts, nothing major, just a quick hello or how's your day, stopped. It wasn't obvious, but the difference was there, creeping into our routine. And it wasn't like I didn't trust her. I did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I didn't say anything at first. I mean, who wants to be that person? The one who questions everything. So, I kept my thoughts to myself. But then the calls started to come in. Strange numbers. Texts from unrecognized contacts. My heart sank the moment I realized I wasn't imagining it. Something wasn't right. I made myself a promise, though. No matter what happens, I won't ignore it. I won't be my father. I just didn't know then how much that promise would cost me. It was a Wednesday when Michael called me. I hadn't heard from him in months, so when his name popped up on my screen, I didn't think much of it at first. Michael was a colleague of Jod's. He wasn't exactly someone I'd hang out with, but we'd shared a few drinks at company events, and I didn't mind him. "Hey, Trey," he said, his voice sounding a little off. "You got a minute?" "Sure," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "What's up?" There was a pause, like he was trying to find the right words. "This isn't easy to say, man, but I need to let you know something about Jod." My stomach twisted at the sound of her name. "What about her?" Michael hesitated. "I don't know how to say this, but she's planning to meet someone, Trey. Someone she's been seeing for a while now." I felt my heart skip. "What the hell are you talking about?" He went quiet again, then took a deep breath. "I didn't want to be the one to say this, but it's not right. Jod and this guy, Stan, they've been. I don't know how to say it, but they're having an affair." I stood up, my pulse racing. No, there's no way. Jod would never do something like that." "I'm sorry, Trey," Michael said, his voice sincere but heavy. "But I've seen it. She's been meeting up with him, telling him things about you. She's planning to stay the night at a hotel with him this weekend." I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to steady myself. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Because this sounds like some kind of twisted joke." "I wish it was," Michael replied, his tone more serious now. "I don't have all the details, but I know enough to know this isn't right. I couldn't sit on it anymore. She deserves better than this. And so do you, man." I felt like the room had closed in on me. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" "I was hoping I was wrong," he said. "I was hoping it was just some misunderstanding, but I can't sit back and watch this happen, knowing what I know." My mind raced, thoughts crashing into each other like waves hitting a cliff. Jod, my wife. The woman I trusted with everything. How could she? Why didn't you just confront her? I asked, barely able to get the words out. I tried, Michael admitted, but she wouldn't listen. She just said it was her personal life and nothing was going on. But, Trey, I think you should know the truth. I swallowed hard. My hands were shaking. So, she's really meeting him? Going to a hotel? Yeah, she's made plans for this weekend. I don't have the details, but it's happening. I ended the call a few moments later, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. The words he said kept echoing in my head, over and over. She's having an affair. She's been seeing someone else. This weekend. I stood there for a long time, frozen. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to breathe. The idea that Jod, my Jod, could betray me like that, after everything we'd been through, was unfathomable. It felt like a bad dream. A nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next few hours passed in a blur. I couldn't focus. I kept replaying Michael's words in my head. She's having an affair. She's going to meet him this weekend. I didn't know if I should confront her right away or wait for proof. But I couldn't sit around doing nothing. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, demand the truth, but another part of me felt paralyzed, unable to act. I was afraid of what I might find. In the end, I knew I had to find out. I couldn't live with the uncertainty. I had to know for sure. And so, that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit idly by. I wasn't going to be blindsided anymore. But first, I had to make sure. I had to be certain. I hired a private investigator. I didn't know what else to do. The private investigator I hired was a no-nonsense guy named Leo. He was in his 50s, a little gruff around the edges, but he had the kind of experience I needed. I met him in a small office tucked away on the outskirts of the city. He took my case immediately, promising he'd gather whatever information I needed to confirm or deny what Michael had told me. I'll start tailing her tomorrow, Leo had said, pushing a legal pad across the table. I'll need her schedule, anything you've noticed recently, anything that could give me a lead. I handed him the details, her usual routines, her work hours, the places she frequented. Leo didn't need much more. He scribbled everything down, nodded, and said he'd get to work. I left his office with a weight in my chest, but I also felt a sense of control for the first time that day. I wasn't just waiting in the dark anymore. I was doing something about it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, staring at the ceiling, running the events of the last few hours over and over in my mind. I tried to imagine confronting Jod with the truth, but my mind wouldn't let me settle on a plan. What was I supposed to say? How would I even begin to confront her about something this monstrous? My phone buzzed at around 2 a.m. with a message from Leo. It was a single line of text. Got her. Followed her to a hotel. Checked in under a different name. She's with him. I'll have more details soon. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. The confirmation I'd feared was now right in front of me. She was with him. She'd gone to a hotel. The worst part was, I'd been waiting for something like this to happen, and still, it felt like being punched in the gut. How could she? I tossed the phone to the side, closing my eyes tightly, hoping the darkness would swallow my anger, my hurt, the overwhelming sense of betrayal. A couple of hours passed before I got another text. This one came with an address. Hotel Vista, room 312. Stan's car parked outside. She's been inside for about an hour. I hadn't planned on doing anything rash, but the information was too clear. The pieces were falling into place, and I couldn't just sit back anymore. I couldn't ignore what I knew. I dressed quickly, not thinking about the consequences, just driven by an overwhelming sense of urgency. I grabbed my jacket, stormed out of the apartment, and started my car. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The drive to the hotel felt like a blur. Every stoplight felt like it was dragging me further into a nightmare I wasn't ready to face. When I pulled into the parking lot, I didn't see Stan's car right away. But then, as I circled the lot, I noticed it, parked under the shadow of a large tree, right next to the entrance. I parked a few spaces away, my breath shallow. For a moment, I just sat there in the car, staring at the hotel. I thought about going in, confronting them both right then and there. But I knew that wouldn't work. My anger would take over, and I wouldn't be able to control myself. Instead, I pulled out my phone and sent Leo a quick text. I'm here. Stay back and keep watching. Don't engage unless I ask for backup. Leo had been helpful, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. I didn't need him involved just yet. I needed to handle this myself. I took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the hotel entrance. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I forced myself to keep moving. The hotel lobby was quiet, and as I approached the elevator, I glanced at the desk clerk, but she didn't seem to notice me. Room 312. I muttered to myself as I punched the button for the elevator. The soft ding when it arrived felt like an eternity. I walked down the hallway slowly, trying to collect my thoughts. I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I reached the door. What was the point of confronting them? What could I say? My feet moved before I could stop them, and I found myself standing in front of room 312. I took a deep breath, steadied my hand on the doorknob, and knocked. The seconds that followed felt like an eternity. No one answered. I knocked again, louder this time. Finally, I heard a shuffle from inside, and then the door creaked open. Jod stood in front of me, her hair slightly disheveled, her face pale. She stared at me for a moment, as if trying to process the reality of what she was seeing. I didn't know how to start. I didn't know if I even had the strength to speak. But I had to know. I had to hear her say it. Jod, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. What the hell are you doing? Jod's eyes widened when she saw me standing there, but she didn't move. The silence stretched between us, suffocating the air in the hallway. My heart was pounding in my ears, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at her. This woman I thought I knew. This person I had loved and trusted. Finally, she swallowed hard and opened her mouth. No. I cut her off, my voice sharp and desperate. I don't want to hear it. I took a step forward, and she instinctively stepped back, her hand resting against the door frame like she was holding onto it for support. I trusted you, I said, my voice cracking as the weight of the betrayal settled on my chest. I gave you everything, Jod. Everything. And you. I stopped myself, my throat tightening. You've been lying to me. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't place. Guilt, fear, regret. But she didn't speak right away. Instead, she glanced behind her, to the room where I knew he was. I could feel my stomach churn, the thought of him being just beyond the door making me sick. You need to leave, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I blinked, unsure I heard her right. Leave? I repeated. You're telling me to leave? After everything? You're the one who's been lying, Jod. You're the one who's been sneaking around behind my back, meeting him. I gestured toward the room, my hands trembling. Is that really what you want me to do? Walk away, pretend this isn't happening? Her face twisted in something between guilt and frustration. She shook her head, as if trying to make sense of the situation. It's not what you think. I didn't plan this. It just... Don't. I interrupted. Don't you dare tell me this was some accident. Don't try to justify it. You knew exactly what you were doing. I was shaking now, but I couldn't stop. The rage, the hurt, it all bubbled up and spilled out, words pouring from me like I'd been holding them in for months. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered, her voice cracking, her eyes welling with tears. But I've been so unhappy for so long. And then Stan came into my life, and I don't know, Trey. I felt seen again. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone really saw me. She wiped at her eyes, but the tears kept coming. I never meant for this to happen. I felt like I was suffocating. How could she stand there, looking at me like that, and still try to make excuses? You're asking me to feel sorry for you? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're telling me that your husband, wasn't enough, and so you go and find someone else to fill that void? She didn't answer. She couldn't. What could she say? There was nothing left to say. I took a step back, my mind whirling. It was like the whole world had stopped for a second. I could feel the walls closing in, like I was trapped inside this nightmare with no way out. I don't care if you're unhappy, Jod, I said, my voice low but cold. I don't care if you're confused or looking for something else. What I care about is that you destroyed everything we built. You tore it down with your lies. And for what? A quick fix? A temporary feeling? Her face crumpled, and she reached for me, her hands shaking. Trey, please? No, I said firmly, shaking my head. I gave you everything, and you threw it away. You're not the woman I married. And that is the worst part. The silence between us was deafening. I could barely breathe as I took a step back from her, the weight of the moment pressing on my chest like a vice. You don't get to come back from this, Jod, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. This is over. You made your choice. And I'm done. If you walk out that door with him, Don't bother coming back. You won't have a place to come back to. Her eyes searched mine desperately, and she stepped toward me. Trey, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I looked at her, my heart aching in a way I couldn't describe. But this wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't about what we had or what we could have been. It was about respect. And she had none for me. Not anymore. You already did, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the hotel, leaving her standing there, the sound of her sobs echoing in my ears. I didn't look back. As I drove home, my mind was numb. I didn't know where to go from here. Everything that had felt so certain was now a void, a chasm I couldn't cross. This was it, the end of the line. And as much as it hurt, as much as it broke me to my core, I knew it was the only way forward. I couldn't keep living in the past, chasing a version of Jod that no longer existed. This was over. The next few days felt like a blur. Everything in my life felt off-kilter. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The pain of what had happened, the betrayal, the lies, kept me up at night, twisting in my stomach like a knife I couldn't pull out. I kept replaying that moment in the hotel hallway. The way she looked at me, her eyes full of guilt and tears. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I knew I had to move forward, but the thought of how to do that, how to tear down everything I'd built with Jod, was almost too much to bear. Yet, I couldn't just sit there and pretend like nothing had happened. There was no going back. Not after what she had done. I called a lawyer the following morning. His name was Michael Strauss. He was someone I'd been referred to by a close friend. I'd never thought I'd need to make a call like this, but here I was, standing on the edge of something that would change my life forever. The consultation was set up for the afternoon, and as I walked into his office, I felt a strange sense of resolve. This was the right thing to do. I needed to take control of my life again, to stop letting the pain from Jod's actions dictate my every move. Michael was a tall man, in his mid-40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor. He greeted me with a firm handshake and gestured to a seat across from his desk. I'm sorry you're going through this, Trey, he said, settling into his chair. I can imagine this isn't easy. Yeah, I muttered, staring at my hands in my lap. It's not easy. He slid a sheet of paper across the desk. We'll need to go over a few details. Your marriage, assets, any property. We'll get this process started. I didn't even look at the paper. Instead, I found myself fixating on the thought of what was about to happen. The reality of it all was sinking in. My marriage, the one I thought would last, the one I thought was strong, was crumbling. I wasn't sure who I was without Jod in my life. But I knew I couldn't keep living a lie. Not for her, and definitely not for me. I just want it over, I said, voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to fight. I don't want to drag this out. Just help me get out of this. Michael nodded, scribbling something on his notepad. Understood. I'll help you through it. But we need to make sure we protect your interests. We'll handle the division of assets, debts, and property. If you want to go for full custody of any shared assets, like your home or joint bank accounts, we'll have to make sure we have everything in order. The words blurred together as I absorbed them. I'm not interested in dragging this out, I repeated. I just want it over with. I don't care about the house. I don't care about any of it. I just want to move on. Michael gave me a steady look. If that's the case, we can look into a quick separation agreement. You can start fresh. I nodded slowly, my eyes starting to sting. Can we do that? Can I really walk away from all this? Just like that? He nodded again. We can, but you need to be sure. Once you start this process, there's no going back. I'm sure, I said, even though a part of me was screaming not to be. But the other part, the part that had been burned by the betrayal, was certain. There was no going back. There was nothing left to salvage. Let's do it. We spent the next hour going over everything. I told him about the property we shared, the joint accounts, and our car. The legalities, the paperwork, it was all a blur. All I could think about was what was coming next. What was I supposed to do once the divorce was finalized? How would I handle being alone? Would I be able to breathe again? As I left Michael's office that day, I felt both a weight lifting and an unbearable pressure pressing down. I was free to move on, but I didn't know where to go from here. Back home, the apartment felt empty. The silence between the walls was deafening. I hadn't realized how much noise Jod had brought into my life, even in the quiet moments. Now, with her gone, the stillness was suffocating. I tried to work, tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but every time my phone buzzed, every time I looked at a photo of her, I couldn't stop the flood of memories. the life we'd built together. It felt like it had never really existed, like it had been a dream I'd woken up from, one that wasn't mine anymore. But I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep dwelling on the past, couldn't let the pain control me. I had to move on. I had to rebuild. A couple of days later, I sent the divorce papers to Jod's office. My heart wasn't ready for the aftermath, for her reaction, but I had no other choice. I couldn't keep waiting for something that wasn't ever going to come. The finality of it hit me that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The words I had been avoiding were now real. It's over. The decision had been made. There was no going back. And though the pain still lingered, I felt something else for the first time in weeks, a sense of relief. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Maybe it was the first step toward healing. It had been a week since I filed for divorce, and the apartment felt like a tomb. The silence was suffocating. I tried to stay busy with work, focusing on the tasks that needed to get done, but it was hard to escape the thought of Jod, what she was doing, where she was, and how everything had fallen apart. The days blurred together, and I tried to keep my mind occupied. But no matter how many times I walked through the city or went out with friends, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. My marriage, the future I thought I was building, everything had crumbled, and I was left picking up the pieces of a life I hadn't chosen. Then came the knock on the door. It was just after dinner, and I had been staring at my phone, debating whether to respond to the endless texts from my family, who still hadn't fully processed what had happened. I had ignored them all, refusing to let anyone in. But when the knock came, I knew. I didn't have to see her face to know who it was. My stomach clenched, and my heart rate spiked. I didn't want to answer, but I knew I had to. I couldn't hide from this forever. I opened the door, and there she stood, her face a mixture of regret and confusion. Her eyes were red, puffy, like she hadn't slept in days. She looked broken. For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if time had stopped. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, I had no idea what to say. "Can I come in?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. The anger, the hurt, it was still there, deep inside me, but I also felt a strange urge to hear her out. Maybe it was the remnants of the person I used to love, the one who had promised me forever. I stepped aside, and she walked in, glancing around the apartment like it was unfamiliar. The weight of the space between us felt heavier than the walls themselves. We sat down on the couch, the silence between us stretching for what felt like an eternity. Jod pulled her legs up under her, hugging her knees, avoiding my gaze. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman sitting in front of me with the one I had married. Finally, she broke the silence. "Trey, I know what you're thinking," she started, her voice shaky. "I know I've hurt you in a way that I can never take back, and I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even deserve it." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Then why are you here?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Why come here and apologize now, after everything? You made your choice, Jod. You didn't just cheat on me, you chose him. And now you're asking me to just forgive you." Her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. She wasn't the same person anymore. "I never meant for it to happen this way. It just happened, and I couldn't stop it. I don't want to lose you, Trey. I never did." "You already lost me," I said, cutting her off. "When you crossed that line, when you decided to be with someone else instead of me, you lost me. This isn't about some stupid mistake anymore. This is about trust. And once that's gone, there's nothing left." Jod looked down, biting her lip. I could tell she was struggling to find the words, but the damage was done. "Please, Trey," she whispered. "I want to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "You don't get it. You don't get to just fix this by saying a few words, by showing up here like nothing happened. This isn't something you can just undo. You can't erase what you did." She flinched at my words, but didn't argue. Instead, she reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine. "I know I've lost you," she said, tears finally spilling from her eyes. "But I'm asking for a chance to make things right, to prove I'm sorry. I'll leave Stan. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll leave him, Trey. Just please don't end it like this." I stood up, pulling my hand away from hers. "It's too late for that, Jod," I said, my voice cold now. "You've already made your choice. You don't get a second chance at this. You can't just tear our lives apart and expect everything to go back to normal because you're sorry now. It doesn't work that way." She looked up at me, her face crumpling in pain. "So this is it? This is the end?" I didn't answer right away. I could see the woman I once knew, The one I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, standing there, waiting for me to take her back. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Yeah, I said finally. This is it. It's over, Jod. You made your bed. Now you have to lie in it. She stood up slowly, her face pale, and turned to leave. But before she reached the door, she stopped. She looked back at me one last time, her eyes full of hurt. I'll always love you, Trey, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I watched her walk out the door and heard it click behind her. And as the silence filled the apartment once more, I felt the finality of it. This was the end. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The days after Jod left were a blur of numbness and quiet. I focused on work, mostly, because it was the only thing that kept me from drowning in my own thoughts. The apartment, once a home filled with laughter and plans for the future, now felt like a hollow space. It wasn't just the silence that weighed on me. It was the emptiness of it all. I didn't hear from Jod again after she left that night. Not a single word. No texts, no calls. The divorce papers I'd sent had been returned with her signature, but that was it. The finality of it all settled into my bones, and the anger that had fueled me for so long slowly began to fade, replaced by a deep exhaustion. I didn't know what to do with myself, or with the life that had been ripped apart. There was no roadmap for what came after betrayal, after the slow unraveling of a marriage. But I couldn't keep sitting in this emptiness. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. One afternoon, a few weeks after everything had ended, I found myself walking through the park. It was one of those crisp, clear days where the air felt fresh, like it could sweep away the residue of all the pain. I hadn't planned on going for a walk, but something about the cold breeze and the way the leaves crunched beneath my feet made me feel like I could move forward. It was then that I ran into Darla. I had known her casually from some of the work events I'd attended. She was a friend of a friend, someone I'd spoken to a few times, but never really gotten to know. But there she was, sitting on a bench, her face lit up by the afternoon sun as she read a book. She looked peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in months, and for some reason, the sight of her felt like a breath of fresh air. Trey, right? She said, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. It's been a while. Yeah, Darla, right? I responded, surprised at how comfortable the conversation felt. She smiled and patted the spot beside her. Want to join me? It's a perfect day for being outside. I hesitated for a moment, but something about her invitation felt easy. So, I sat down next to her. The conversation started slow, the kind of small talk that happens when you're just getting to know someone. But as we talked, I found myself feeling lighter, like I was shedding the weight of the past few months bit by bit. As we spoke, Darla mentioned that she had recently gone through a tough breakup of her own. She didn't go into details, but there was something in the way she spoke, like she knew what it felt like to have the ground ripped out from under you, the way I did. We ended up walking together for a while, the conversation turning from our past relationships to what we were doing with our lives now. I told her about my work at the bar and how, for the first time in a while, I was starting to enjoy it again. She told me about her job at a local nonprofit and how she'd started doing yoga and painting to cope with everything that had happened in her life. Sometimes, she said, the best thing you can do is just give yourself space to breathe, to figure out who you are outside of everything that's been weighing on you. Her words hit me harder than I expected. It felt like a reminder that there was still life beyond all the pain, beyond all the heartache. There was still room for me to grow, to heal, to rebuild. We exchanged numbers before parting ways, both of us promising to grab coffee sometime soon. I didn't expect much to come of it, just another acquaintance, another friend. But when I got home that night, I realized I was looking forward to something for the first time in weeks. I felt the weight of the last few months starting to lift, even if it was just a little. The next few days passed in a haze of work and quiet reflection. I spent a lot of time thinking about Darla and our conversation. I hadn't expected it, but I found myself smiling at the thought of her. A couple of days later, she sent me a message asking if I wanted to grab that coffee we talked about. I agreed without hesitation. When we met at a cafe a few days after that, it felt like a fresh start, like stepping out of a fog and into something brighter. We didn't rush things. Our conversations were easy, natural, like we'd known each other for much longer than we had. There were no expectations, no pressure. Just two people trying to figure out how to move forward from the wreckage of their pasts. As the weeks went by, I began to feel more like myself. I wasn't whole yet, not by a long shot, But for the first time since everything fell apart with Jod, I felt like I was starting to rebuild. Slowly, but surely, I was learning to live for myself again. And through all of this, Darla became a steady presence in my life. She was understanding, patient, and kind. She didn't try to fix me, but just offered support when I needed it, and space when I didn't. I knew that what I was feeling for her wasn't the same as what I had felt for Jod. It wasn't a desperate kind of love, built on the belief that someone could complete me. Instead, it was an easy connection, one that was growing from a place of mutual respect and understanding. And maybe that was exactly what I needed. I wasn't in love with her yet, but I wasn't afraid of the idea of love anymore. Not the way I had been. I was starting to believe again, believe that there could be someone who would love me for who I really was. Someone who wouldn't tear my world apart. A few weeks later, when I met up with Darla for dinner, I found myself looking at her with new eyes. She wasn't the fix I had been searching for. But in a way, she was exactly what I needed, a reminder that life could go on, even after the worst kinds of pain. And maybe, just maybe, it could even be better. As we walked out of the restaurant together that night, I couldn't help but feel the smallest spark of hope. For the first time in months, it felt like the world was opening up to me again. I was finally starting to move on. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to what came next. The weeks following my first real conversation with Darla were quieter than I expected. I kept busy, work, daily routines, and keeping my distance from everything that had once been my life with Jod. Slowly, the weight on my chest lifted. I still thought about her from time to time, but it wasn't as suffocating as it once was. The pain was still there, but it wasn't consuming me anymore. One afternoon, while I was finishing up a sale with a client at the bar, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer it, but something about the call felt familiar. Maybe it was the number, or maybe it was the way the caller ID lit up. Either way, I picked it up. Hello, Trey. My stomach dropped when I heard the voice on the other end. Michael, the one who had told me everything about Jod. The one who had been there when I needed to hear the truth, no matter how hard it was. Michael, I said, my voice coming out more flat than I intended. What's going on? I wasn't sure if I should call you, he said, and I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. But I thought you should know. I braced myself, waiting for whatever bombshell he was about to drop. The past few months had been quiet, the storm finally beginning to settle, but I didn't expect the calm to last forever. Nothing ever did. I got an update on Jod and Stan, Michael said, his words making my heart sink. I ran a hand through my hair. I don't need to hear about them anymore, Michael. It's done. It's over. I get that, but you need to hear this, he insisted. I'm not trying to cause more pain. It's just, I think you should know. I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath. All right, go ahead. Michael hesitated before continuing. Stan's life is falling apart. He's been out of work for a while, barely scraping by. His family's pulling away from him. And Jod, I don't know how to say this, but she's not doing well. She reached out to me a few days ago, saying she was a mess. She didn't sound like the woman you knew, Trey. It was different. She sounded lost. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me, an angry, vindictive part of me, wanted to say, good. Let her suffer. But there was another part, buried deep, that felt sad. Sad for her. For the woman she had become. Sad for the shattered version of the person I once loved. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice colder than I meant it to be. I don't know, he replied. I guess. I thought you deserved to know. She's been calling around, Trey. People from her past. She doesn't know where to turn. I was silent for a moment, my mind racing. So, what do you want me to do with this? Michael sighed. Nothing. I just wanted to give you the truth. She's out of your life now, but I think you deserve to know what's happened to her since. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes drifting toward the door to the back room, where Darla had been earlier. She was working on a project, but there was this quiet, comforting energy to her presence that grounded me. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to keep holding on to the rage that had consumed me for so long. It was time to let go, completely. Thanks, Michael, I said quietly. But it doesn't change anything. It's over. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I know. I hope you find peace, Trey. I really do. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I already am. We hung up soon after, and I sat there for a while, staring at the phone in my hand. I wasn't sure if I was glad to know what had happened to Jod, or if I would have preferred to stay in the dark. Either way, I knew one thing. I couldn't keep looking back. I had to keep moving forward. I stood up, walking over to the door where Darla was finishing up her project. When she looked up and saw me, she smiled softly, and it was like everything clicked into place. The noise, the mess of the past months, all of it faded as I looked at her. "How's it going?" I asked, my voice steady. A weight finally lifted from my shoulders. She smiled again, that calm, peaceful smile. "Better now that you're here." I nodded, taking a step closer. "Yeah, I think I'm getting there, too." Darla put down her project and stood up. "Getting where?" I didn't have an answer, not one that made sense. But I didn't need to. I could feel it in my chest, the hope, the possibility of something new, something better. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid to see what that might be. "I think I'm finally starting to heal," I said, and it wasn't a lie. I was. One step at a time. Darla walked over to me, her hand finding mine, and in that moment, I realized that moving forward didn't mean forgetting the past. It meant learning from it, taking the pieces, the pain, the lessons, and using them to build something stronger. We didn't say anything more as I walked with her out of the bar and into the quiet evening. I had no idea where things with Darla would go, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what was ahead. The past was behind me. The future was waiting. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over it. It was time to let go. And I was ready.